Hey everybody, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
Hey Kelly, how's it going today?
It's going pretty good. It's a beautiful day, even though we're supposed to have thunderstorms later.
It has been like kind of weird. It's been like sunny and raining at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not complaining because I don't have to run my sprinklers, which is nice.
That is true. And the reason why we're explaining the weather is because we have some guests on who don't live in Oregon.
That's
and
right.
They might have a different experience where they live.
I bet they have very different weather.
Probably. So as a follow-up to our last episode, we reviewed the documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad,
right?
Which was a fun episode. And
it was so much fun. And it was such a great movie.
It was. I really liked it. So we said at the end real quickly, hey, we think we're going to have some guests on next time from this really fun organization that we heard about on the documentary called Hear Yourself Think. And they're here with us. So we have Erin and Dave from Hear Yourself Think. Hi, guys.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, guys.
Good.
To be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're really excited to talk to you guys and hear a lot about your organization because I think it's very interesting what you're doing. So if you don't mind, let's just dive right in. And first of all, do you just want to tell us a little bit about who you guys are?
Sure. We're Erin and Dave. We are the husband and wife co-founders of a nonprofit organization called the Hear Yourself Think Project. And Hear Yourself Think comes out of our experience, our combined, more than 2 decades of experience doing grassroots organizing here in the Rust Belt of Southwestern Pennsylvania, talking to hundreds of thousands of voters at their doors and seeing the really powerful and toxic influence of media, especially inflammatory right-wing media like Rush Limbaugh and Fox News, the sway that has and the power it has to warp hearts and poison minds. And so we founded Hear Yourself Think to work on this media problem, but really on an interpersonal, grassroots, face-to-face, heart-to-heart level, since that's what our background is.
That's amazing. Thank you for doing that.
So Beth is actually the person who found you guys watching the movie. She had told me about this movie months ago, and I finally got a chance to sit down and watch it, and I was really impressed. But she was like, oh my God, did you see those people at the end? And then she started telling me about you guys. And I was really interested, and I went to your website. I think the thing I'm curious about is, how did you start Hear Yourself Think? Like Beth and I both had moments of clarity after Trump was elected, and we've had these, ideas of how to fight fake news. And that's been our premise since I joined Beth. But what was it that made you guys just be like, oh my God, we've got to do something?
That's a good question. I mean, every region, everybody you talk to feels like they're in the most, sort of right-wing media saturated zone of the country. But we definitely felt, I definitely felt growing up in the 80s and, when Limbaugh, came in and then, just was everywhere, was sort of omnipresent. I just noticed way before I was into political organizing or activism, what was happening with my friends and family. I had a good friend who, I was a roommate of mine, and he delivered pizzas. And he was at first, he said, yeah, I'm listening to this guy. He's a big jerk. He's an a-hole, but he's funny and I enjoy listening to him. Like within a month or two, my friend was a ditto head, right? And I said, something is happening out there, right? And you can see it in your aunts and uncles and your friends and family, where it was worming its way into people's hearts and minds, this sort of attitude and a sort of level of resentment and anger. And so way before Trump, and, we're not the only people to have seen it before Trump, obviously, but we were,
right.
We definitely saw this creeping like a fog over the consciousness of our friends, our relations and over the country. And then Fox News kicked in, and it was just obvious that this was something that couldn't go on indefinitely without having serious consequences for our democracy. And Erin can maybe talk a little bit, because I think the tipping point for us was during, because everything switched into an extreme high year of craziness once President Obama was elected. Mm-hmm. This whole apparatus, this propaganda apparatus, kicked into overdrive, and so the tipping point for us was
the fight over healthcare reform. Leading up to that, and especially the summer of 2009, I'm sure you guys remember the town halls and seeing what was happening across the country and just the really kind of unhinged vitriol that was kind of a departure from past big policy debates about issues. Dave was at a town hall hosted by then Senator Specter, who was a key swing vote. And of course, he's a senator for the whole state. And so Dave was part of a bus full of people that came from, the Pittsburgh and surrounding area out to a very rural area about maybe an hour and a half away from the city. Mm-hmm. And it was really ugly. And if you look up some of the YouTube footage from that day in Katanning, the Senator Specter Town Hall, you can see just like the sea of angry white people there, animated by the birtherism conspiracy theory, thinking that, healthcare reform is a way to kill grandma, just really unhinged stuff.
It got to the point at that event. Now, this little town hall was overwhelmed, especially almost exclusively that day by people from the Tea Party and from the right. And it got to the point where the African American folks that had come out from Pittsburgh, this was their senator too, and they had to leave because they felt threatened.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, frankly, it was the only way it wasn't a Klan meeting was they didn't burn a cross. I mean, it got extremely ugly. And so that was sort of a tipping point for us that this stuff is not only misinforming people and sort of warping their attitudes and warping them emotionally to some degree, it's now definitely overwhelming the culture, right? And we knew that something had to be done. We didn't know it was going to take the form of Donald Trump, what the ultimate, thing that was going to happen that was going to be a genuine threat to our democracy. But we knew that there had to be some moment where this was going to be evident to everybody, not just those of us who had sort of been, for whatever reason, tuned into it early and also as activists seeing it,
And part of, getting back to your question about what made us start Hear Yourself Think, it was really born out of a frustration that people weren't taking the influence of right-wing media seriously. And, when you're working on an issue-based or a political campaign, it's like, keep your head down, just work on this issue. We have to do our job, within this limited kind of scope. And so we weren't really seeing anyone take on this right-wing media problem in any way that wasn't either very academic or just very high level, at a national level, like the advertiser boycotts. And those things are important, but, we thought there was a real need to build a campaign and put some thought into, what is this media really doing to people? Why are people drawn to it? How does it affect and infect their thinking? And then what are some strategies that we can apply from our work going into, quote, hostile territory to try to connect with people and apply that to having conversations about media influence? Because from our perspective, it's a lot easier to get someone to choose to turn off Fox News and remove those influences from their life than it is to get it off the air tomorrow, right? So we chose to come at it from that end.
I want to say a couple of things. One is I've really been thinking about how with the Obama years, we had this, the Tea Party rise up basically in resistance to a liberal Democrat being president. And now we have this crazy orange buffoon who's president. And you've seen a rise up of liberal activism. And I'm almost curious to, if, let's say, we have an Elizabeth Warren president, which is my choice, so that's always going to be my example, for the next cycle, do you think that we'll see a decrease in activism on the liberal side and that more increase of the Tea Party movement again? Because it feels like whoever's in power, the underdog is that's when they get organized.
Yeah, that's a real concern, and that is the typical cycle and the typical pattern. I'm hoping that people have learned their lesson that this is, the democracy isn't, especially in this era, at the moment we're in and moving forward, it's something you can't just sort of turn it on and off. We have to be consistent because we talk to so many people now who say, President Obama got elected. I thought everything was fine, especially a lot of these great women who are coming out in our area and all across the country who, came off the sidelines after Trump was elected. And they're very remorseful. And a lot of times what you hear them say is, President Obama was elected. We thought the country had turned a corner and we were going to be fine. But, so that was really taking our eyes off the ball. So I would imagine, maybe we'll see some of that same cycle. It's inevitable to a certain extent, maybe, but we really have to stay engaged, and we have to encourage everybody to stay engaged, because until, and this isn't really, it sounds partisan, but it's not really not partisan what we're saying. We need Democrats and Republicans and others and independents. We need, two functioning parties. But what we have right now is one party that just absolutely doesn't work in good faith. And their primary go-to weapon is propaganda. And until they are punished relentlessly at the polls for playing that game, and people keep a focus on that, and punish this extremist element that's really overtaken the Republican Party, I don't see them beginning to play fair or not trying to gin up another Tea Party type movement against a Democrat.
My second thought is, Erin, you'd mentioned, about Fox News being taken down tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And I've had this idea that I keep thinking about that crowdfund for the wall, those people that crowdfunded to build the wall. And I'm thinking, I want to start a crowdfund for taking over Fox News. And let me tell you why. Because I don't think shutting it down will work, because you have Rush Limbaugh, you have all those other networks out there that are spewing the right-wing media. The people who watch Fox News aren't going to switch over to like CNN or to MSNBC. They're going to go to wherever they can get what they were getting from Fox News. And so I was thinking about it. It's almost like we need to take it over from the inside and change it from the inside of having Fox News actually start to report news or actually start to be journalists.
Well, they've never been that. They've never done any of that. So I don't know that any one of them are qualified to be anything other than sort of Entertainment Tonight style reporting, which is basically all they've always been.
Yeah. I just have this little like fantasy of like writing up Tucker Carlson and being like, Tucker, we've talked about this.
I know, but Tucker Carlson was talking good about, I know, but you know what? He was talking good about Elizabeth Warren the other night, and I don't know if that's a sign of the apocalypse or if, perhaps his demeanor, like his mask slipped, or maybe it's just the death of Roger Ailes has caused some sort of inner chaos at Fox. But I mean, it was the shocking moment for 3 minutes, he read directly from her policy.
That was Tucker Carlson?
Yes, it was. Mm. It was on her plan for the repatriotism of American jobs. So it's her plan to bring some of these manufacturing jobs back to America.
But it would be good to see either one of you like suddenly appear and like drag him off by his ear,
Yes.
Or maybe the bow tie. Yeah. We've talked about this, Tucker. Let's go. You're
well, what I'm thinking is the first step is that if you constantly are spewing propaganda or lies on your show, is that you no longer could have a live show. It would have to be recorded so it could be edited. That would be the first write-up. I've actually thought about this quite a bit. So, because I feel like, especially in watching the documentary, like you really have to deprogram these people who have been programmed by Fox News, and who better to deprogram them than Fox News themselves.
Right.
Because that's who they're going to keep watching.
That would be. Have you ever seen, we often plug this movie. Have you ever seen the movie, A Face in the Crowd?
I haven't.
I've never seen that either.
Hey, you guys that would be a great movie for you guys to watch and then do a little review of. Don't do any, maybe don't do the spoiler, but what is it?
Well, so it's Andy Griffith.
Believe it or not.
The Andy Griffith show. So the cast is amazing. Walter Matthau's in it, Patricia Neal. And it's the story of the discovery and rise to power of kind of a homegrown demagogue.
Yeah.
And back in the MSNBC days when Keith Olbermann was
right.
on, he always used to refer to Glenn Beck as Glenn Lonesome Rhodes Beck.
And that's the character. That's the name of the character that.
Okay.
I always wondered where that came from until we finally saw the movie. And it was directed by
Kazan.
Guy who did On the Waterfront. Mm-hmm. He also, I think, turned evidence on some of the blacklisters. But people are complicated. And check that movie out. It's a great old movie. And for some reason, it's fallen through the cracks. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's very prescient.
And it's called A Face in the Crowd?
Face in the Crowd. And it sort of deals with what you're saying, Beth, about sort of a little bit like how you might from the inside take something down like a Fox News.
Yeah, that's my plan. We'll see how it goes.
let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about, on your website, you mentioned a trailblazing journalist, Dorothy Thomas. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about her and how you connected with her story.
Yeah, it's Dorothy Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thompson. Yeah. I'm sorry, I wrote it down wrong.
Okay, that's okay. And she was pretty awesome. And in 1939, Time magazine declared that Dorothy Thompson was equal in influence in America to Eleanor Roosevelt. But once again, she's somebody who's sort of fallen through the cracks. And she was over in Europe as a journalist in the years that Hitler was coming to power, before he was in power. And she actually interviewed him at one point and really focused in on sort of the propaganda and how he was impossible to interview because he was sort of, his eyes were glazed over and his voice would almost go to a scream. And it was everything he said was as if he was speaking at a mass meeting. And she had, other very negative things to say about Mr. Hitler. And so like a couple of years later, she was expelled from Germany for trying to wake people up to the actual threat of Nazism before that was cool, before people were doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's worth looking into. And we, on our website, she wrote in the something we use in our presentation is we often talk about the War of the Worlds Martian Panic broadcast of 1938. So One of our strategies is we try to use parallel examples, right? So if somebody doesn't want to hear about how their favorite, host is a demagogue, like if you go up to them and say, hey, by the way, Tucker Carlson's a demagogue, right? They might not want to hear that. But if you tell a parallel story, sort of a touchstone story, an American story that everybody sort of knows, but maybe don't know the details. So we'll sort of run through the War of the Worlds Martian radio panic, the Orson Welles Mercury Theater accidentally scared a bunch of people. And but it was an early example of how media, new mass media sources could inflame people to take action in the real world based on pure fantasy, especially fantasy that's anchored in fear, right? And Dorothy Thompson, after the Martian Panic, she wrote an incredible editorial. What are some of the things she said, Erin, that we often refer to? People can go to our website, and we have the entire editorial on the website.
Mm-hmm. So this is from November 2nd, 1938, and of course the radio broadcast was Halloween Eve in 1938. So Dorothy Thompson writes, all unwittingly, Mr. Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air have made one of the most fascinating and important demonstrations of all time. They have proved that a few effective voices, accompanied by sound effects, can so convince masses of people of a totally unreasonable, completely fantastic proposition as to create nationwide panic. They have demonstrated more potently than any argument, demonstrated beyond question of a doubt, the appalling dangers and enormous effectiveness of popular and theatrical demagoguery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you have to, and that's just a little taste. You can read the entire editorial at our website, and but she just really kind of rips the lid off in terms of mass media and the power of mass media to influence people in a wide scale way based on things that are just absolutely not true.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That reminds me of one of my very favorite Mark Twain quotes is, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that reminds me a lot of that because, it's always easy people want to believe sensational stuff. It's one of the reasons we have conspiracy theories, because people don't want to believe one person could go into a school and shoot a bunch of children, even though that terrible, terrible, terrible thing happened. They would much rather believe that it's a big conspiracy because then it fits the crime. It fits. Of course, there needs to be this big thing in order for all these children to be deceased.
Yep.
Right.
It can't just be one person snapping, because then it could happen to you and it could happen to your child.
Well, that brings us to a very scary subject. We talk a lot about Fox News, but what we found, especially interviewing people in 2016 in the run up to the presidential election at Trump rallies, we would go. Trump actually came to our hometown right down the street from us at our high school in Ambridge, is that, we talk about, well, if only we could make this terrible thing, Fox News, go away. But, as we all know, it's a wider phenomenon in terms of misinformation and conspiracy theories. And a lot of young people, we think about Fox News and the aging audience, but a lot of young people that we've talked to are really wrapped up in the Alex Jones stuff. It's like we were talking about Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook conspiracy. So then they are big Trump supporters. A lot of the young people are absolutely bought stuff. Yeah.
And actually, when you were talking about it, what it reminded me of too is in episode 1, Elizabeth and I talked about the Great Moon Hoax, which was kind of the first incident of fake news. Have you guys ever heard of this?
What is it?
It was called the Great Moon Hoax.
No, maybe.
And it's really fascinating. And some of the pictures are on our website because what they did is they drew these beautiful pictures of what was supposed to be like life on the moon. And there was a series of 6 articles that were published in The Sun in August of 1835 that said that there was discovery of life and civilization on the moon. And people totally believed it. And then they eventually announced that the telescope that had let them discover this had been destroyed. And that's why they could no longer print more articles about it.
Wow.
But they basically admitted, oh yeah, we just said this to sell papers.
Right.
Wow.
It was just 100% about that. But you guys might enjoy looking that up, the Great Moon Hoax. It's not as, it's a good example that's not as scary.
Yeah, I've spent some time looking into hoaxes and stuff, but I don't think I've ever stumbled across that one. That's great.
Yeah, it's really great. I still have the photos of it, the pictures that they have, and some of them are still on our website as some background pictures.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, realistically, what if they are real and the moon landing really is faked and we've just never discovered? I mean,
okay, Kelly, go back and listen to episode 6. Episode 6 is when we interviewed Dr. Jolie about conspiracy theories.
Exactly. This is me starting a conspiracy theory.
Yes, you have to go back and re-listen to episode 6 about why we interviewed this psychologist who studies conspiracy theories. And whenever you start to believe a conspiracy theory, just go back and listen to that episode.
Okay. Instant deprogram.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
So these moon people weren't wearing bow ties, were they?
No, but they had just fantastical creatures and all these things. And it just, and people believed it because back then they didn't have any other way to prove that it wasn't true.
Well, in interviews that were conducted after the War of the World hoax, the number of people who would admit that they fell for it, the number one reason that they gave was, I heard it on the news. CBS News had never lied to me before.
Right.
So that's the Fox News blueprint, right? Looks like a news set. Even Alex Jones looks sort of like an anchor desk, right?
Yep.
It's fair and balanced, all that good stuff. So it's a pretty simple playbook, and it's effective, not for everybody, obviously, but you can sway enough people that you can, especially then when you bring in gerrymandering and other, voter suppression tactics, you can have a big influence.
Yes. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to ask you about on your website, I really love the way you guys worded this, is you state, we're working to make reason, not rage, the loudest voice in the room. And first of all, do you have that on a t-shirt? Because I need to buy that.
We do have bumper stickers that say...
We have a vast surplus.
Yeah.
We're overstocked with bumper stickers that say, don't let Fox flatline your mind. If you want those, we can mail you some of those.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's pretty great.
Yeah, we will take that.
We're on it.
But I also noticed that that's the title of the workshop that you offer. So I wanted to ask you about this workshop and, is that currently being offered? Can people take this? How can they do that?
Yes. So people can definitely take the workshop. And what we've been trying to do since, we're just 2 people and we have a small and scrappy board that's been helping us, build. We have done some workshops online, like over Skype, for like a smaller amount of people, maybe less than 10, so that we can all see each other, go over some of the ideas, do some practice conversations. But really nothing compares to, being in the room and being able to work some of this out together. So our full communications training is about 3 hours long, and there's time to get into some of the science about how fear can actually temporarily shut down our ability to think critically about issues, and why propagandists and demagogues love and use fear, how they use it to create a hole where our critical thinking should be, and then insert their preferred narrative about, who to hate, right? Who's to blame, who the good guys and the bad guys are. So we obviously, working to warn people about the problem of right-wing media isn't something that a foundation feels terribly comfortable funding. So we get small donations from people, but to the extent that like a group could bring us in and cover travel expenses, we'd be happy to come and do trainings with people and work through some of these issues together. I think what's important for people to know is that if you're going to ask us, what do I say? There is no perfect one thing to say. It's really using tactics to help kick that conversation with someone else who might be really keyed up on some of these narratives and in a more agitated state. How do you get that conversation out of, the brain's fear and rage center, the amygdala, into the higher mind? So we talk about tactics like asking open-ended questions and, being careful with your language that you're not continuing to, escalate the situation. So how do you de-escalate? How do you calm that person down and be able to, literally create the space where they can hear themselves think, right? That's how do you deliberately create those conversations so you're not just shouting past each other? So those are some of the issues that we get into. We have lots of different presentations, but we kind of have a track for activists and people that want to get some more insight into, the history of right-wing media and some of their tactics. And then we also have a curriculum for essentially a Fox News audience. And so we've done some presentations with, in conservative areas using these parallel examples like the War of the Worlds, and also, kind of comparing leaders throughout history like FDR. Why did FDR talk about freedom from fear? So, using parallel examples helps people have insights into the current problem in a way that they're not just, set up to resist if you talk about, Trump being a demagogue, for example.
Wow. So you guys actually walk right into the lion's den and talk right to the people who are watching Fox News.
Yeah, and I think, it's not, that's where we live, right? These are...
we would never leave the house.
That's just our neighbors. Yeah.
We did.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the hopeful thing about this that I want people to understand is that it's really not that scary. We see the extreme examples in the news, and we hear like a lot of this stuff about how intractable the problem is, and it is a hard problem, but people are complicated. And a lot of what draws people to right-wing media is that they feel disconnected or isolated. And so they really want to have a source of meaning in those relationships. But, like in the brainwashing of my dad, following Jen's story with her dad, under the influence of all this media, he became hostile and bigoted, and the family relationship suffered. So, it sometimes is like a cry for help. It's really not as hard as you might expect to have some of these conversations.
Just to have the conversation. Yeah. You have to manage your expectations. And that's another thing we talk about is people aren't, if your goal is to immediately convert someone to your point of view, that's relatively rare, right? And even with people, and I think it's not entirely, it depends on the individual and how deeply they are into this stuff. It's not entirely inappropriate from what we're seeing in our country right now to talk about some of this as, sort of a cult, right? Even Trump talks about in those terms. I wouldn't lose any voters even if I shot somebody. So, and what you learn about deprogramming people from a cult is, if you just overtly challenge their entire worldview that they have this strong emotional attachment to, that they derive meaning from, they're going to resist that. But if you can penetrate with like one fact, right, and manage your expectations, and you sort of manage your expectations to what counts as a successful conversation. Mm-hmm. Just having the conversation is a success, especially with somebody that you're typically incapable of having a conversation with, or getting anything across to. So, this is the bend the curve stuff, mm-hmm. right? This is not the overnight, transform somebody's entire worldview thing.
And
I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point. Kelly, what was the name of that book from the the guy who was David Duke's godson.
Oh, Rising Out of Hatred, Derek Black's book?
Yeah, Derek Black. So it took years for him to come around from his original point of view to his new point of view. And I think that's a really good point, Dave, is that you shouldn't go in expecting the ultimate result.
Right. I mean,
right
we're in a state where, not just, right wingers or Republicans are upset and angry. Like you were saying earlier, the left is fired up. And a lot, if you have an activist mentality, you want to change it. Right. And we all want to make immediate change, but in some circumstances, it's just not. Mm-hmm. It can even be counterproductive if you're expecting too much, because you become demoralized. Mm-hmm. If and you're not necessarily going to see the kind of immediate change that you want.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Erin, I interrupted you. You were about to say something.
Oh, sure. So, no, we were just talking initially about the clip on our website of a conversation with the three ladies at the Trump rally back in Pittsburgh. And one of the reasons we want to put that on the website is to show people that even in, a very polarized environment, it is possible to talk to people. But one of the things that one of the women said was, if you stop and think, right? So Dave was having a conversation with them about how media has changed and become more sensational, and, how what happened there at the hall wasn't a traditional town hall as we'd always known it, right? It was more of a rally. And so that's the kind of marker of success that you're looking for in a conversation. When somebody says, I hadn't thought about this before, or if you stop and think, right? They're not going to suddenly say, I want to be a liberal Democrat, right? But you can see someone's body language change. They'll signal to you that they're hearing you, and there's an open dialogue. Even
the small, I think what sort of opened the door when I did get an acknowledgement out of them to say, and this, this wouldn't be, satisfying on a large scale ideological level, but, I said, well, you wouldn't see this didn't seem like a town hall to me. This seemed more like a rally. And then the one lady said, well, they do the same thing on the Democratic side. And I said, well, I don't know if you would turn on CNN and see, just a cheerleading rally for, Hillary Clinton or whoever. And then the one lady said, well, you know what, you're right. This was more of a rally. So that's not the end of the world or anything, but that was an entree to a longer discussion to just get that be a little bit, I guess part of what we preach is be a little bit more small bore, right? Find small agreement that you can then move on from.
I think that's so important because it feels so overwhelming to think that you're trying to go into a conversation to change somebody, like to completely deprogram somebody in one conversation. And that's an unrealistic expectation. So I think that is so important. I recently had an interaction with somebody at a town hall that really kind of blew me away. And I was afterwards just almost feeling bad about myself that I didn't do better in talking with her. And she kind of surprised me. I will say I wasn't expecting this. But I had somebody come up because I had gotten to ask, it was Senator Merkley is our senator here in Oregon, and he had a town hall. And I actually got to ask the first question. I was the first number drawn, which was...
That's awesome.
And so I, of course, asked about fake news because that's what I focus on. And I asked him about, what they're doing for 2020 to make sure that same thing doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, his answer was they aren't doing anything in Washington. But because of that, people tend to come up to me after and want to talk about the podcast and everything. And I was approached by somebody who doesn't believe in vaccines. And ironically, Kelly and I had just done an episode about vaccines.
Right.
And Kelly and I are both very pro-vaccine. And she was not, and was telling me that per the CDC website, that measles had been eradicated before the vaccine came out. And it was the vaccine that actually brought them back. And I think I just kind of gasped a little bit. That's not true. That's not true. I've never fact checked that because I've never heard that claim before. But I can guarantee you that that's not true. And then I had to stop and I said, you know what, just check your sources. Just the only thing I can recommend to you is check your sources. Media Bias Fact Check is a great resource to check your sources.
Right.
To see what and she's like, okay, yeah, no, my source is the CDC. I'm like, it wasn't, but check your sources.
Right. It does not say that, but
it does not say that. You might want to double check that. And I left thinking, oh my gosh, here I have, I've devoted 2 years of my life here to fighting fake news. And when it was put in my face, I kind of felt like I stumbled and fell a little bit.
You are not alone on it. This stuff is hard and it's flummoxing. And that's a big part of our presentation is, I don't care how long you've been doing this or who you are. And I've seen people who are allegedly great communicators or people on TV who know everything. And when you're confronted with this stuff, it is absolutely flummoxing. This is the toughest, in my opinion, this is the most intractable, toughest problem in the country right now. Just being in there and having the conversations, I very often I feel it's completely unsatisfied with the way that I've handled something, especially if you're not prepared for it, right? And you're at the grocery store or whatever, and it hits you out of the blue, and then you do like the full 36 hours of I could have said this, why didn't I say that, right? But, it just comes with the territory,
right. Well, I feel better, so thank you. I've let that expectation to go that I am supposed to be perfect and completely help somebody in one conversation.
Well, that does actually bring me to the question I wanted to ask the most, which is, you guys do this workshop, and I've seen your video where you talk to the three ladies. And I guess my question is, so many times, let me put this into a story mode. I talked the last episode about how we have a personal friend that we've had to cut ties with. He was the best man at our wedding. He was my husband's best friend, and he became a Trump supporter from initially starting to listen to Rush Limbaugh, and just got to a point where his main concept is everything is crooked, everything is flawed, we might as well just burn the whole place down. And that's his perspective. So when you're having any sort of conversation where you're trying to bring that person back to a rational argument, how do you do that? Because that seems to me, it's an unreasonable premise to start with. So, you're wanting to talk about it's not okay to put children in cages. And, you can't be pro-life and think that that's okay because there's thousands of them separated from their parents. And there's so many different aspects of it that feel like in order to support, you have to let go of these moral steps that lead us to a community, a humanity that we all took for granted and we shouldn't have, because obviously we've always, that I think if anything, Trump has opened a lot of white Americans' eyes to a lot of people have been living this way their whole lives. They've had this fear. They've had this thing that we're all experiencing, this uncertainty about the future that we thought, like you mentioned with your friend who thought, oh, well, we elected Obama, so we really thought we had turned the corner, even though so many people could have told us that wasn't the case. So what do you do when you're having that conversation and there just seems to be no getting through? Like, what would be a simple premise to start with that you feel like, okay, everyone can agree with this?
These are very tough conversations. One of the things we talk about is the power of narrative, right? So, and this is pretty obvious that, people talk about this quite a bit, especially in organizing and activist worlds. Like the people won't necessarily listen to stats, or they will, but first they have to be emotionally invested. And the way to do that is by telling a story.
Right.
So, but you need to be, and you obviously are, you are deeply connected on a values level to the way you feel about this and to your concern about how this guy feels about the way he feels. But he's the conspiracy theorist, the vaccine conspiracy theorist, and you're the guy that you're dealing with. They're captured by certain narratives. So, and narratives have an emotional power, right? Like the narrative of everything's crooked. There's no point in trying. There's no point in participating. We just want somebody who'll burn it all down, right? So,
Right.
so there's a certain narrative power. We could talk about where that emotional power comes from on that level. I mean, just that sense of you're the guy with the inside information, and you just want to watch it all burn. But we feel so. The thing about coming up with your narrative that will have an influence in that situation is making it incredibly personal. And I heard that in your voice in the way that you described the situation. So if we're talking about somebody who thinks that every politician forever was crooked. Now, I don't know who you might choose to talk about, but I might choose to talk about FDR, right? And what I'm going to do, and here's the paradox. We talk about having reasonable conversations and we want to penetrate with reason. A big way that you can do that and need to do that is with emotion. Somebody has to know that this means something to you on a deep emotional values level, and then you need to make sure that you make them hear your story, right? Take them by the arm or whatever it is with your eyes, or however you're going to lock them and say, "Listen, I understand how you feel. I'm hearing you. I understand your position on this. I absolutely need for you to hear me on this. This is why this matters to me," right? And once again, there's an aspect of this is sort of right from the beginning. You're going to be dealing with a manage your expectations thing. They're not going to necessarily convert on in the moment, but if it's heartfelt and it comes from your values, and you're going to tell a story that is not necessarily about just countering what they said, but it's coming from your heart, and it's about penetrating you want to penetrate with reason, but you're penetrating on an emotional level. Does that even make sense?
It absolutely does. I remember when I first started working at I worked for an organization where we had to go to our state legislature in order to try to push bills forward that were that benefit and affect the disability community. And the first thing that you learn is that you have to tell your story, because you're absolutely right. And that's something I've been telling people as an advocate for a couple of years now, is that, politicians they never remember stats. They don't want to read anything else. They want to hear your story and be able to use that to provoke the emotional response to get those things done. Like, the stats matter, but the story is what starts the conversation. Mm-hmm. It's what reels people in. So it absolutely does make sense. And I'm really glad you brought that up.
Something that Dave always used to say when he was training canvassers to go out into essentially Fox News districts, right? We weren't knocking on friendly doors when we were with a labor-affiliated organization. He would say, people think that they feel first. So just the value in reestablishing or making that, human connection. And I totally agree with thinking about what the source of your kind of emotional power is, and why you're a person that cares and what you care about. Because if someone's in your life, there are definitely going to be areas of shared values. But I mean, just simple kind of questions or statements that I try to draw people out a little bit more, just because that's more my temperament. So I'll say things like, well, like, for example, with your friend who was the best man, well, that's really terrible. Tell me more about why you feel that way. But just in a real natural kind of like, because you are concerned, like, that's a pretty, it's a terrible way to feel, like everything is shit and you can't trust anything. And so if he were to open up and tell you some more about that, then I would try to, work in a question like, well, when I hear this, it makes me think, who would want us to feel this way, right? To be feeling like there's no point in even trying, and just trying to plant those seeds. So someone's thinking about the fact that they didn't arrive at this kind of feeling of despair on their own, right? That this has been intentionally created by media figures and people that want us to be discouraged and cynical so that they can step in and have all the power and move their agenda without any opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah, asking questions is extremely important. We always talk about trying to find an inarguable, something that people will argue with anything, right? But something that but especially in this day and age, but finding that thing that that will have some kind of emotional fundamental resonance, with who you're talking to, and that it's at least very difficult to disagree with. Now, if you're dealing with somebody, and this also comes down to trying to figure out who is worth your time and who isn't. right? A lot of times if somebody's completely off the rails, and this is a judgment call, right? If there's a core of people who, Trump could shoot somebody and they're never going to change their mind, then maybe that's what the next person or the next door is for, knock on the next one. But if you have I'm just thinking of an example we often use with the best man who, nothing matters. We should just burn it down because it doesn't matter.
Right.
Having a detailed story and that hooks into your values, and remembering that, we think about like reason and rationality in this Mr. Spock frame where it's just this cold, detached thing. But that's not how the founders thought about it, right? They had a very deep emotion, paradoxically, a very deep emotional investment in holding reason up as something that could essentially save mankind, right, from tyranny, right? So reason, truth, rationality are values that we're allowed to get emotional about, right? That we're allowed to express in an emotional way. So a story that we often talk, we run back through and we talk about using parallel examples from the past, right? That people aren't in this moment because the right-wing media machine wants people PO'd about the thing of the moment. And then whenever they're done with it, they throw it away and it's forgotten about. So something we run people through is the Ebola crisis of 2014. And that would be an inarguable example of how government mobilized to protect American lives and what the result was. And also the opposition they faced in terms of conspiracy theories that said that they were doing exactly the wrong thing, right? So we had the
That's right.
Yeah, the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. We had an issue with people coming to the United States, and there was a potentiality of it spreading here. All the right-wing voices used it as fodder. Oh, look what Obama's doing. He's going to kill us all. Laura Ingraham said what? He wants to get back at America for the bad things it's done to Africa. That's why he wants it to spread here. Trump said at the time, via Twitter, that the government was doing the absolutely wrong thing and that they essentially needed to build a wall, right, to stop, right?
You know what?
I love
go
how,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I love how walls stop germs. I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing science how when a germ sees a wall, it's like, oh, can't go.
I'm not sure he said literally build a wall, and that's essentially he was saying, look, shut the country down. Remember, he said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that people went over there to help. Now that they're potentially infected, these people who put their lives on the line to fight disease, they have to be barred from our country now too. Right. So remembering a past parallel example and knowing it in detail and being able to tell it in a compelling way and saying, look, I understand how you feel, but the summation here is, who do you know that's died of Ebola? Raise your hand in this room if you've died of Ebola, right?
Right.
Right. You don't know anybody because despite what all these cynical and nihilistic voices were saying, the people who were saying nothing matters and we should just burn it all down, despite what they were saying, the federal government's response not only stopped the spread of Ebola in the United States of America, where I think only you hear conflicting, two or three people died, right? They stopped that spread cold in the United States. And not only that, our government, the United States federal government, went over to West Africa and stopped the spread of Ebola in West Africa as part of this same effort, saving thousands and thousands of lives.
That's right, because they fast-tracked a vaccine, didn't they? I remember,
yes. Yeah. And Americans put themselves at risk, and they went over there for strangers in another country. And not only did they stop the spread here, but they saved those thousands of people over there because we're the United States of America, and that's what we should do. And I don't know about you. You can say that nothing matters, but I think we should be proud of that. We should be proud of the response of our government and our scientists to protect us and save people in Africa.
You got me, Dave.
Yeah, I'm ready to give you my friend's number. No, I'll take care of it myself. I'll do it.
But now that doesn't mean they're going to. In fact, in that case, with that story, in that moment, they're probably explicitly not going to say, "Oh, I now agree with you." But
right.
They're not going to not be impressed, right? That you had your shit together and you had your facts together, and that you knew what you were talking about and you had passion about it, and that you were using emotion and passion to stand up for reason and decency. I mean, that sounds corny, but
right.
These things actually they reach people, right?
That's awesome. Well, hey, tell us how our listeners can get involved with Hear Yourself Think, or where they can find you. What can we do to throw some traffic your way?
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for having us on, because I think that really helps. And we hope that people will come to our website, which is hearyourselfthink.org, and sign up for our email list if you are interested in doing a training either virtually over Skype or bringing us in. We would love to do that. Just keeping in mind that we don't have any kind of a budget beyond the donations that we get from doing trainings, and we have a few sustaining donors. So if donating something like $5 a month is something that you can do, that really helps. We want to be able to devote full-time attention to this, but right now we're not really able to. We're working and trying to keep the lights on. Of course, it's relatively cheap to live in the Rust Belt, but we
Right.
want people to join us, and we want to be able to go and do more of these trainings and really build up that community of learning and support as we're all practicing having these conversations, learning from each other about what works or what doesn't, and then just feeling like we can get off our back foot, in these conversations and be more confident and prepared, because we have a lot of work to do, and we cannot count on, there's a lot of excitement in the presidential campaign, that's going to come and go, but we didn't get to Trump overnight, and we really have to deal with kind of the cultural sickness that right-wing media has created and exploited, and there is no easy overnight way to deal with that. It's just putting in the work every day, and so we want people to join us in that and start by just coming to our website and getting involved.
So what is your website address?
It is hearyourselfthink.org.
All right, perfect. And are you guys on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere like that?
We are on Facebook, also under hearyourselfthink.org. You can search for us. We do have a Twitter account.
I never use it. I hate it.
Which is called...
I hate Twitter. I can't keep up with it, and it scares me.
But we did a good Twitter handle. It's War on Truth.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But
I actually came around to Twitter because of the podcast. We started a Twitter account for the podcast, and now I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know I should.
I get this. Where I struggle is Instagram, and that's where all the cool kids are, and I don't know anything about it, so.
I will tell you, I know Instagram because I have very cute pets and a child. And I know Twitter just because I literally only go on there most days to check. My mom joined Twitter after Donald Trump was elected just so she could troll him. And so I check in every once in a while just to see what literally, she's just calling him an MFer all the time. She is not taking your workshop, but she does come up with some funny zingers. So I like to go on and give her some of her Twitter hearts so that she knows that it's not in vain. She's not screaming into a void. At least someone hears her.
Yes. Yes. Well, cool. Well, we will have definitely put the link on our blog. So we do a blog every week for our episodes.
Yes.
And we will send people to your website and your Facebook, but we will only put the Twitter on there if you want us to. So.
Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not.
Okay. All right.
Nothing
well, there's nothing there. Okay. I got it. So the last thing we wanted to ask you is, our tagline is spread jam, not lies. And so we do a little segment at the end where we spread some jam. And that's basically kind of like our good thing for the week. And we usually I usually do a song, and Kelly likes to do books. But we want to ask you, what is your jam of the week? And it can literally be anything. You could tell us your favorite jam, like that you like on toast if you want.
First of all, this is adorable, right? So,
thank you.
As good progressive activists from the Rust Belt, we are massive Bruce Springsteen fans.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, just be off the charts. Embarrassingly so, right? So he's got a new record coming out, and there's a couple of good tracks off that. But what I want to recommend is, staying in our theme, is an incredibly overlooked but incredibly awesome song from the album Magic, from Springsteen's album Magic, which kind of deals with the Bush administration.
Mm-hmm.
Not too overtly. I mean, most of the songs you can take in multiple ways, but there's definitely a strong current of politics in there. And the title track itself, Magic, I would really encourage, just in the same way that we said you should watch A Face in the Crowd, check out Magic, and check out if the lyrics are unclear. I don't advocate reading the lyrics first. I think that kind of kills the song. But after you listen to the song, if you're not clear on the lyrics, then give it a second listen with the lyrics and see if you don't find it incredibly relevant to our discussion about fake news.
Perfect. Well, that's perfect. We will take that as a double jam for magic and a face in the crowd.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we'll never not put on music. I mean, Bruce Springsteen is amazing. So,
all right. Now you're talking.
Perfect. Well, guys, thank you so much for doing this with us. I hope that we're able to collaborate in the future because I feel like we're working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
And I was really excited when I heard about your organization because I was like, oh my gosh, I think they are talking directly to me and my soul. Like, this is what I need in the world. So I was really thrilled to find you guys and to find that there's somebody else out there fighting for this. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help people, know how to talk to each other and to be able to hear yourself think.
Hey, thank you so much for having us. This was awesome. Thanks so much for your work with the podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Well, Kelly, what did you think?
I thought that was a great interview. And I loved so many points where, telling your story and finding something that you can mutually agree on. I think that they make really great points.
I do too. I am so glad that they are out there and fighting the fight to
That's right.
with this problem. And I think they liked my crowdsourcing idea for taking over Fox News. So I think we should do it.
I think that you would probably be a better person to do that than the person who is doing the crowdsourcing for the wall funding, because apparently no one knows what he has done with that money.
Right.
So
yeah, that is a whole nother discussion. Isn't that?
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
These people are so frustrated that they gave their money and there's still no wall.
There's still no wall at all.
I can't believe that.
I know. Crazy. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. All right. So let's get into our jams and then let everybody go so that they can go straight to hearyourselfthink.org and check out that amazing website.
That sounds great. Do you remember who goes first this week? I think it's you.
I think it is too. Okay. Yeah. So my jam of the week is a song by Feist, and it's called My Moon, My Man. It's the first song that I ever heard from her. It's a few years old, but it's just a really great song. And it's actually, they think that it's more about like a breakup. And I just thought with this week where we're encouraging people to break up with Fox News, that it fits. And one of the, she says, my moon and me, not as good as we've been. It's the dirtiest clean I know. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good breakup song for Fox News. I like it. So, My Moon, My Man. I love this song. Go listen to it.
And my jam is, you might remember that around the time that I first started the podcast, I spread my jam of my favorite book of all time, which is a book that is co-written by Neil Gaiman and Sir Terry Pratchett, called Good Omens. And Sir Terry Pratchett passed away a couple of years ago. And R.I.P., my friend. But before he passed away, he apparently asked Neil Gaiman to make this book something, make it a show or make it a movie. And I've been watching for at least the past year and a half while it's been in production, since it was first announced. And I've been really, really excited, but also kind of holding my breath because we all know that we've all had a favorite thing that has been made into something really, really shitty. So I have to tell you, it was released last week on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And it is 6 episodes, and it is a one-up series, and it's perfect. It's perfect, and I could not be happier.
Nice.
Yeah. I finally got to share the story with my husband, who doesn't read.
Ooh.
It's like, this is actually really good, Kelly. Like, you now have the experience that almost no one else has, which is their favorite thing is turned into something that's not a piece of shit.
Very nice.
Yeah. I mean,
You like that.
It's amazing. And I definitely recommend everyone go out and get it. If you don't have Amazon Prime, sign up for it and get like a free week and just binge watch it, and then you can cancel it. But I mean, the show is just, it's so worth watching. David Tennant plays Crowley and Michael Sheen plays Aziraphale, and they are an angel and a demon, and they're trying to prevent the end of the world, and it's so good. It's just really good.
That sounds amazing.
Yes.
I'm going to change the subject for just a second.
Yeah.
I just want to mention last week after we posted our episode about the brainwashing of my dad, I noticed they had a tweet where they were asking people to watch it at somewhere other than Amazon Prime, just because they are still paying back their backers. And so when you watch it, definitely watch Good Omens from Amazon Prime. I think it's a Prime original, right? Like
it is, yes.
That's who made it. So yeah. So definitely that's totally good there. But for the documentary, if you can afford it and want to still go see that, try to look for it on like iTunes, where you're maybe paying 99 cents for it or something to help them pay back their backers. So just wanted to mention that since we were talking about Prime again.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Well, until next time, you can find us at Twitter and Facebook at Podcast Fake News. You can email us at podcastfakenews@gmail.com. You can read our blog at podcastfakenews.com. And our soon-to-come Instagram via Kelly.
It'll just be pictures of dogs and cats.
Yeah.
And cute children and flowers.
Yeah, it's hard. See, that was the thing with Instagram and the podcast. I was like, but what do you pictures of fake news? Like, yeah. I don't know how that would work. But apparently Instagram stories are a big thing, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I'll see if I can figure it out. If I can, it'll probably be Podcast Fake News.
Probably, unless that's taken.
Oh God, I hope not.
Yeah. Unless I tried to open up an Instagram before and already took that name.
You can't have this because Beth already has it. And I'll be like,
right.
Beth, what's the password?
I don't know.com. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, until next time, don't forget, spread jam.
Not lies.